I don't know if you've ever noticed, but college students can be really smart. Heard about a freshman geology class in which the professor asked the students to name 3 things that are on the earth that aren't on the moon. An opportunistic student. Seeing a dumb question when he saw it listed in succession: roller skating, Bruce Springsteen, and the Republican Party are not on the moon. He's right. College students, if you haven't noticed it, can also be very dumb. Maybe apocryphal. But I also heard about some guys from my college, Memphis State, who had gone down to Ole Miss, met some girls, partied too hard for too long, woke up too late, got back not in time for their chemistry exam, and so they went to the professor with this tale of woe. Oh my gosh, he had a flat tire. Put on the spare, it was flat too. Could we please just have another take at this test? He agreed. The exam only had one question. Which tire on your car was flat? You see how the quality of a question changes things. There are good questions, and there really are bad questions. And although I know some mamas out there, especially with these kids right in front of me, may not like me saying this, there are dumb questions. I know y'all don't want me to say that, but it's true. I've heard them. They exist. Now, don't get me wrong. There is nothing wrong with asking an ignorant question. In fact, all questions are based on ignorance, right? I mean, there's nothing wrong with being ignorant. Ignorance is fine because ignorance can be overcome. But there's a tremendous difference between an ignorant question, whereby somebody doesn't know something but wishes to know that something they don't know and is open to knowing it, versus a dumb question, whereby somebody doesn't know something, doesn't know they don't know it, doesn't really want to know it, and in fact is utterly foreclosed to ever knowing it. And if I could be so bold, a hyper dumb question, well, that arises when someone thinks that he is so much smarter than the person that he's questioning that he's trying to expose, that he doesn't realize that he's the one that's stuck back on dumb. Again, sorry, mamas. Sometimes true is true. Now, this is precisely what's happening to Jesus today. Jesus is being given this exam by folks in no position to give Jesus this test. They come up and they ask this question to someone in their minds who couldn't possibly have more knowledge than they did. And so they ask this question in their place of entrenched ignorance, which I hope I've already established, is the birth womb of dumb questions. The Sadducees asked Jesus a question that Luke lets us know they're not even serious about. They're simply trying to publicly embarrass him. They're convinced that they're so much smarter than him. And so they ask this question that they think will utterly expose him. Now you have to understand that the Sadducees in first century Judaism were kind of the elite sect. These are folks who exist in every time and place, and they just know that they know so much more than all the rest of us know. They're better and smarter and more sophisticated than everyone else. They're highly educated. At the top of the social strata, they sneer at folks who call sparkling wine champagne. or a violin, a fiddle. You know these people. Don't be one. And yet you also need to know, for this question of theirs to make any sense, that the Sadducees also don't believe in the idea of resurrection. That is, they believe the idea of life after death is silly. It's a quaint belief held by the uneducated masses that they in their great erudition have risen above. And so the point of their question for Jesus is to expose him. How silly this idea of life after death is, and along with it, expose him as some backwoods bumpkin of a rabbi from Nazareth. And the way they choose to do this is by telling this story. It's a crazy story. It's one bride for 7 brothers. Now see, according to Mosaic law, if a man dies, his wife has to marry his brother. Now, this sounds very odd to us. For most women out there, I think this probably doesn't strike you as a great prospect. I mean, maybe you have a really great brother-in-law, I don't know. But in the ancient world, this tradition had a purpose. And the purpose was to shelter dispossessed women. There was no social safety net in the ancient world, and so a widow was vulnerable and basically adrift if she didn't have anybody to take care of her. And so this call for a brother to take his dead brother's widow in is a compromise solution to a very tragic situation. Sounds like the world, doesn't it? Compromise solution to tragic situation. It was its way of trying to help widows. Now, of course, this doesn't make a whole lot of sense to us because, and I want you to hang on to this, we don't live in the same sort of world. Thank God, we don't. We don't live in a world that there, exists this sort of disparity between men and women. But these Sadducees, for all their self-importance, they couldn't comprehend somehow that point. And that's their whole problem. And by the way, again, excuse me, kids, that's why the question's dumb. Women have to be the property of someone. Thus they've always been. Thus they will always be. And so in heaven, Jesus, whose property will this woman be? Seven brothers. Each of them died. Passed her one to the other, to the other. They don't think of her, by the way, in this. Could you imagine the heartache of her? No agency. And so they say to Jesus, well, is it answer number one, she is one man's wife? That's impossible because she has 7 husbands. Or is it answer number 2? She is 7 men's wife. That's impossible because she's only allowed 1 husband. Come on, Jesus. She's got to be somebody's wife. No such thing as a free agent woman. So is it answer number 1 or number 2? And with that, in their closed little world, they think they've got him. But it's a dumb question. It's predicated on their compromised, confined, limited little worldview and their belief that that's all the world could ever be. I'd go as far as say it's a hyper dumb question because it's built on the idea that these guys know all of possibility. All we can do is hunker down in apathy. It says now is all that we could ever have and ever be because we can't imagine a world with the prospect of new. And so they turn this bad question over to Jesus, believing there can only be two answers. Answer number one, which won't work. Answer number two, which won't work. Gotcha, Jesus. And with that, Jesus promptly tells them the answer is number three. It's not one or two, it's three. Your worldview stinks. Again, Jesus' critics work out of this immovable idea of an established settled world, a world of unjust social arrangements where brokenness and sadness and injustice are just forever, where widows are left bereft because the vulnerable are always to be pawns in the machinations and equations of the powerful. But Jesus says God's new world is not just an extension of our old dying world. It's a whole new world. The world as God intends it to be, where everyone, including this hypothetical woman, are seen as equal children of God, not a piece of property. Where life is not forced to be compromised all the time, even in the face of death. Or even the broken relationships we endure on this side of heaven can somehow be put right finally on the other. The answer is number three. Something totally new. We're slow to get this. Because we're ignorant of it. We think the future is based only on the past. What happened yesterday, what happened tomorrow, and on and on and on. But just because we're ignorant of the wonderful plans of God doesn't mean we have to be dumb. By entrenching ourselves in this dying old world, we don't have to do that. And so today Jesus speaks of a future that overcomes our past, that redeems our past, that finally, thank God, leaves our past in the past. Now, I know that there are some injustices in this world that are so massive. There are heartaches very deep. I have no doubt that today people have walked into this church and thought that their pains could never be overcome. Could never imagine them being made right. And those people would be the first to tell us that they don't just need kind of a world with a makeover. They need totally something new. They need really a whole new world. But that, of course, we can't give ourselves. That would only come to us by way of gift. But they are the sophisticated amongst us. And they say it's silly. They say deal with realism. The world as it actually is, they call it sophistication, and they call people like us fanciful and escapist, these notions of something more. But I tell you this, I won't ever settle for a future that's only based on what I can conceive of now. I think that's dumb. Because even though I don't always get it, I'm not smart enough to get it, I gloriously know what I don't know. And I don't know all the good plans that God has for us and for us to do. And I know there's a truth way bigger than me. And thus I believe that the dumbest question I could ever ask would arise from me questioning the amazing possibilities of a living, loving, redeeming God, the answer is not old, broken 1 or 2. My friends, forever and ever, the answer is number 3.